There's a reason ABBA still fills dance floors decades later. Those four voices and that unmistakable sound became the soundtrack of a generation. Everybody knows Dancing Queen and Mamma Mia by heart. But tucked between the greatest hits are songs about menacing city cats, fascist Pied Pipers, and Soviet dissidents that most fans have never even heard. Today, we're counting down ABBA, 15 weird songs you didn't know. Number 15, King Kong Song by ABBA. Long before ABBA became a global phenomenon, they were still figuring out exactly what kind of band they wanted to be, and King Kong Song is proof of just how far they experimented. Tucked away on their 1974 album Waterloo, the same record that carried them to Eurovision glory, this track leaned into hard rock and glam, a world away from the polished pop the group would soon become known for. Its working title was actually Mr. Sex, which gives some sense of just how different this era of the band could sound. The song did modest business on Swedish radio charts and served as a B-side in several countries, but it never became a defining ABBA moment, and Benny Andersson and Björn Ulvaeus themselves later admitted it was one of their weaker efforts. Still, for longtime fans digging through the Waterloo album today, it's a fascinating reminder that ABBA didn't arrive fully formed. They tried on different sounds before settling into the melodic, harmony-driven style that would eventually conquer the world. And this loud, slightly clumsy detour is part of that story. In Sweden, the track actually managed to climb to number 4 on the TO Top Radio Countdown, staying on the list for 4 weeks despite never receiving a proper single release of its own. And it served as a B-side in several other countries, including Australia, where it was paired with the single I've Been Waiting for You. The mismatched sound of a hard rock riff sitting next to what would soon become one of the most successful pop acts in history makes the track a genuinely odd listen even now, decades after ABBA moved on to smoother, more radio-friendly territory. Number 14, What About Livingstone by ABBA. Also buried on the Waterloo album is one of the strangest subjects ABBA ever tackled in song, a 19th century Scottish explorer. What About Livingstone is written as a gentle scolding of young Swedish listeners for losing interest in the great explorers of history using David Livingstone, the missionary famous for his expeditions across Africa, as the example worth remembering. It's an unusual choice of subject for a pop song aimed at teenagers. And even stranger, the lyrics describe Livingstone traveling up the Nile River, a detail that doesn't actually match any of his real expeditions, which mostly began from Cape Town or Zanzibar and never touched the Nile at all. Despite the historical slip, the song captures something charming about ABBA's early years, when Björn Ulvaeus was still experimenting with lyrics that read almost like short history lessons set to a bouncy pop melody. It's the kind of song that surprises longtime fans who assume they know every corner of the group's catalog, simply because nothing else ABBA ever released sounds quite like it. The real David Livingstone actually undertook 4 major expeditions into Africa during the 19th century. 3 of which began in Cape Town and the last in Zanzibar, meaning the geography in ABBA's lyrics doesn't quite line up with the explorer's actual life. Even so, the song remains a charming curiosity, a moment where a Swedish pop group briefly turned into an unlikely history class. Number 13, Susie Hang Around by ABBA. Also from the Waterloo album, Susie Hang Around stands out for a very different reason. It's one of the rare ABBA tracks with a lead vocal from Benny Andersson instead of Agnetha Fältskog or Annie Frid Lyngstad, the 2 singers most fans immediately associate with the group's sound. The song opens with a jangly guitar riff reminiscent of American folk rock bands like the Byrds, a texture almost nowhere else in ABBA's catalog. Lyrically, it tells an uncomfortable little story from a child's point of view, about a group of older kids cruelly telling a younger girl named Susie to stop following them around and find friends her own age. Her mother eventually steps in to defend her, but the song ends with the older children mocking her anyway. It's a strange, slightly mean-spirited narrative to set to such a cheerful melody, and it's easy to see why it never became one of the group's signature songs. Still, for fans exploring the deeper cuts of Waterloo, it offers a glimpse of Benny stepping into the spotlight in a way he almost never did again. The song was recorded early in the album's sessions, just a few weeks after the very first Waterloo track was laid down, back when the group was still working under a somewhat looser, more experimental approach. Before their sound became tightly polished, few casual listeners would even guess it was ABBA if they heard it without knowing, which is exactly why longtime fans consider it one of the record's hidden gems. Number 12. Hey, Hey, Helen by ABBA. Tucked onto ABBA's self-titled 1975 album as a glam rock-leaning album track, Hey, Hey, Helen tackled a subject almost no one else in mainstream pop was touching at the time: divorce and single motherhood, told from a place of genuine empathy rather than judgment. The lyrics follow a woman named Helen navigating life after her marriage ends, weighing the loneliness of raising children alone against the freedom of no longer being tied to an unhappy relationship. It never became a single in most countries, serving instead as a B-side, and it has often been left off ABBA's biggest hits compilations over the years, which is part of why so many casual fans have simply never come across it. Yet several music critics have pointed to it since as one of the earliest pop songs to genuinely engage with the feminist conversations happening throughout the 1970s, treating a divorced mother's story with a level of nuance rarely found on the radio at the time. Musically, it's also one of the group's more guitar-heavy, glam-influenced tracks, a sound they would rarely return to in their later, more polished years. Depending on the country, the song served as the B-side to either Mamma Mia or Fernando, two of the biggest singles of the group's career, which likely explains why so many listeners picked up the 7-inch without ever flipping it over. Decades later, the British dream pop band Lush recorded their own cover version, helping introduce the overlooked track to a younger audience who had never encountered ABBA's more serious side. Number 11. When I Kiss the Teacher by ABBA. Opening ABBA's 1976 album Arrival with an almost startling burst of energy, When I Kiss the Teacher tells the lighthearted story of a schoolgirl with a crush on her teacher who finally works up the nerve to kiss him. It's a subject that raises eyebrows decades later, though at the time it was written and performed as innocent, bubblegum pop mischief, the kind of playful premise common in songs of that era. The track began recording sessions under the working title Rio de Janeiro, a name with no obvious connection to the finished song, before eventually being renamed to match its actual lyrics. As the opening track on an album that would go on to include global blockbusters like Dancing Queen and Money, 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 When I Kiss the Teacher often gets completely overshadowed, even though it's the very first thing listeners hear when they press play on one of ABBA's most commercially successful records. For fans who only know Arrival through its massive singles, revisiting the album opener is often a genuine surprise. Recording sessions for the track began in June 1976, months before the album's October release, and the finished song runs a brisk 3 minutes, packed with the kind of galloping energy that made ABBA's up-tempo material so infectious on the radio. It was never issued as a single on its own, which is likely why it remains one of the least remembered tracks on an otherwise enormously popular record. Number 10. Tiger by ABBA. Also from the Arrival album, Tiger swaps ABBA's usual warmth for something considerably darker and more unsettling. The song is sung from the perspective of a predator stalking the shadows of a big city at night, comparing urban life to a jungle where danger lurks around every corner. Agnetha and Frida deliver the lyrics as though they themselves are the threat, warning listeners to be careful walking home after midnight, with imagery of glowing yellow eyes and neon-lit streets that feels closer to a horror film than a pop record. The exact meaning has been debated by fans for decades, with some interpreting the tiger as a literal predator or stalker, and others reading it as a broader metaphor for the dangers of drugs or urban decay. During the 1977 concert tours, the band leaned into the unsettling mood even further, opening live performances of the song with the sound of helicopters roaring over the speakers. It's a striking example of just how far ABBA was willing to stretch beyond their sunny pop reputation. Even at the height of their commercial success, the song later appeared in ABBA, the movie. The group's 1977 concert documentary and its accompanying music video showed all four members dressed head to toe in denim, riding through the night in an American car, leaning into the same shadowy big city atmosphere the lyrics describe. Number 9. Eagle by ABBA. At nearly 6 minutes long, Eagle is the longest song ABBA ever recorded, and it sounds almost nothing like the tight 3-minute pop singles that made them famous. Opening their 1977 record ABBA, the album, the song, drifts through sweeping, progressive rock-style arrangements, a clear departure from their usual radio-friendly structure. Björn Ulvaeus has said the lyrics were partly inspired by the novella Jonathan Livingston Seagull, about a bird chasing a sense of freedom beyond the ordinary flock, and partly written as a tribute to the American band The Eagles, whom both Björn and Benny Andersson deeply admired at the time. Despite the ambition behind it, Eagle never became one of ABBA's biggest hits, though it did reach number 1 in Belgium when released as a single. For a group so closely associated with concise, hook-driven pop songs, Eagle remains one of the clearest signs that ABBA was capable of, and interested in, something far more expansive when they chose to be. It was eventually released as a double A-side single alongside Thank You for the Music in 1978, with a music video directed by longtime ABBA collaborator Lasse Hallström, who would go on to shape much of the group's visual identity throughout the rest of their career. Even without a huge chart run behind it, the song has remained a favorite among die-hard fans, who often point to it as proof of just how much musical range the group had beyond their singles. Number 8. I'm a Marionette by ABBA. Few ABBA songs sound quite as eerie as I'm a Marionette, a track built around the unsettling image of a puppet being controlled by unseen hands. It was originally written as the closing number of a 25-minute mini-musical called The Girl with the Golden Hair, which ABBA performed live during their 1977 European and Australian concert tours, telling the story of a young singer who chases fame only to feel trapped and controlled once she achieves it. The song's narrator describes being pulled along like a puppet on strings, performing for a crowd that treats her less like a person and more like an object to be manipulated. Alongside 2 other songs from the mini-musical, it was later given a studio recording and included on ABBA, the album, in 1977. The theatrical, almost operatic tone of the piece was a bold experiment for a group best known for 3-minute pop singles, and it remains one of the strangest, most theatrical detours in their entire catalog. When it eventually reached record store shelves, it did so quietly, tucked away as the B-side to the single Take a Chance on Me in January 1978, meaning most listeners at the time likely never even realized this eerie little puppet show existed at all. Number 7. Move On by ABBA. Closing out ABBA. The album is one of the group's most unusual structural choices, a slow, waltzing song that opens not with singing, but with a spoken word verse delivered by Björn Ulvaeus himself. Move On drifts through reflections on freedom, restlessness, and the pull to keep traveling rather than settling down, with Agnetha Feltskog taking over the vocals for the song's later verses. It's a meditative, almost philosophical closing statement for an album that otherwise leans heavily on upbeat, danceable pop, and it stands out as one of the only ABBA tracks built around spoken narration rather than a sung melody throughout. The song went through a string of working titles during its writing process, including Big John and Joanne, before settling into its final, more contemplative form. Years later, it was even translated into Spanish as Al Andar for ABBA's Spanish-language album Gracias por la Música. For a group known for crafting some of pop music's most efficient 3-minute hooks, Move On shows a very different, more contemplative side of their songwriting. Despite its unusual structure, the song was still pulled from the album and released as a single in early 1979, paired with Mamma Mia as its B-side, giving fans in certain territories a chance to hear this quieter, more introspective corner of ABBA's catalog on its own. Number 6. The Piper by ABBA. By 1980, ABBA had already conquered the charts with songs about love, heartbreak, and dancing, which makes The Piper all the more jarring. Tucked onto the Super Trooper album, the song borrows from the old folktale of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, but Björn Ulvaeus has said his real inspiration came from Stephen King's novel The Stand, and its portrayal of a charismatic figure leading people toward destruction. The lyrics deal directly with the seduction of fascism, warning that people can be drawn toward dangerous, authoritarian leaders without fully realizing what they're following. Musically, it matches the mood, built around medieval-sounding flutes, drums, and choral harmonies, unlike anything else in ABBA's catalog, including a haunting Latin passage sung by Agnetha and Frida. Released as the B-side to the massive hit single Super Trooper, the song was largely overshadowed by its more famous pairing, even as its subject matter marked a striking new direction for the band's songwriting. Björn later explained that the lyrics reflect a broader fear that people will always be susceptible to wanting that kind of leader again. The song was recorded during the same productive stretch of sessions that produced several other Super Trooper tracks, including Andante, Andante, and On and On and On. Yet its unusual subject matter and medieval instrumentation set it apart from everything else the band was writing that year. That same period of songwriting also produced the more politically charged material that would eventually define much of the Visitors, suggesting The Piper was less of a one-off experiment and more of an early signal of where Björn's lyrics were beginning to head. Number 5. Soldiers by ABBA. Also from the Super Trooper album, Soldiers continues the darker, more politically minded direction that Björn Ulvaeus was beginning to explore as ABBA moved into the 1980s. The song describes the unsettling sound of marching drums and blaring horns drawing closer, using militaristic imagery to warn about the dangerous pull of nationalism and the way ordinary people can get swept along by displays of strength and spectacle. Rather than a specific war or conflict, the lyrics read more like a general warning, questioning whether listeners are prepared to simply go along with the crowd once the drum beat starts. It never became a single and remains one of the more overlooked tracks on an album best remembered for the title song and The Winner Takes It All. Yet within ABBA's catalog, Soldiers stands as an early example of the more serious, unsettled tone the band would lean into even further on their final studio album the following year, as their music increasingly reflected the tensions of the era surrounding them. Musically, the song builds around a steady, marching rhythm that mimics the very drum beat its lyrics describe, giving the track a tense, almost cinematic quality that feels closer to a spy thriller soundtrack than a typical ABBA album cut. 4. Two for the Price of One by ABBA. Few ABBA songs have a plot quite as strange as Two for the Price of One, a track from their final studio album, The Visitors, sung not by Agnetha or Frida, but by Björn Ulvaeus himself. The lyrics follow a lonely, low-paid man who answers a personal ad placed by a woman seeking a companion, only to discover once he arrives that the arrangement involves both the woman and her mother. Told with a wry, almost comedic touch that stands out against the more somber tone of the rest of the album, the song pairs an oddball narrative with a breezy, soft rock arrangement. It was never released as a single and has remained one of the more obscure tracks in ABBA's catalog ever since, overshadowed by heavier, more emotionally direct songs elsewhere on The Visitors. Still, for a band that spent most of its career singing about heartbreak and dance floors, a comedic story song about an ambiguous personal ad remains one of the strangest detours in their entire catalog. It was written and recorded during the same early sessions for The Visitors that produced the melancholy Head Over Heels, and the two tracks are often mentioned together by longtime fans as the rare moments of levity on an album otherwise defined by sorrow and uncertainty. Number 3. Head Over Heels by ABBA. Also from The Visitors, Head Over Heels offered a rare moment of lightness on an otherwise somber album, though its lyrics carry a satirical edge that's easy to miss on first listen. Sung by Agnetha Feltskog, the song describes a high society woman dragging her exhausted husband from party to party and boutique to boutique, always setting the pace while he struggles to keep up. Built around a tango-influenced arrangement, it's a noticeably different sound from the synth-heavy tracks surrounding it on the record. When it was released as a single in early 1982, it broke the group's remarkable streak of 18 consecutive top 10 hits in the United Kingdom, becoming their least successful single in years. Its accompanying music video featuring Frida playing the demanding socialite and Björn playing her weary husband was also the final ABBA video directed by their longtime collaborator, Lasse Hallström. Despite its underwhelming chart performance at the time, the song has since become a favorite among fans exploring the band's less celebrated later material. During its writing process, the track carried the working title Tango, a clear nod to the Latin American rhythm that gives the song its distinctive, almost theatrical swagger compared to the rest of the Visitors. Number 2. The Visitors by ABBA. The title track from ABBA's final studio album is unlike anything else the group ever released, built around cold synthesizers and an unmistakably tense, paranoid atmosphere. The Visitors was written as a protest song about political dissidents living under surveillance in the Soviet Union, describing the fear of a knock at the door that could arrive at any moment. The subject matter was different enough and pointed enough that the entire Visitors album ended up being banned in the Soviet Union following the song's release. Sung by Annie Fried Lyngstad, whose own family history includes fleeing wartime Norway as a child, the track carries a weight and unease that feels worlds away from the group's earlier, sunnier hits. Many critics and fans have since come to regard it as one of ABBA's most artistically accomplished songs, even though it only reached modest chart positions in the United States, where it saw limited promotion. As the opening track and title song of the band's final album before their long hiatus, The Visitors plays almost like a closing statement, trading the dance floor for something considerably more serious. Inside the album's original sleeve notes, the track was actually listed under a slightly different name, The Visitors, Crackin' Up, a small detail that hints at just how personal and unsettled the band members were feeling as they recorded it, even before the finished song reached record stores. Number 1. Under Attack by ABBA. Released in December of 1982, Under Attack holds a unique place in ABBA's story. It was the last original single the group released before quietly stepping away from music for nearly 4 decades. Recorded for a greatest hits compilation after an attempted 9th studio album stalled out, the song trades ABBA's familiar warmth for icy synthesizers and a tense, almost frightened vocal performance from Agnetha Fältskog. The lyrics describe the unsettling sensation of being pursued, with many listeners since interpreting it as an early, eerily accurate depiction of being stalked, a fear that would sadly become very real for Agnetha in the years following the band's breakup. Commercially, it became one of the group's weaker performing singles, arriving just as their popularity was fading and both couples within the band were already divorced. For decades, it remained a footnote, largely forgotten outside dedicated fan circles, until its haunting, nightmarish quality found new life decades later within the Mamma Mia stage musical. As ABBA's true closing statement until their surprise reunion decades later, Under Attack remains one of the strangest and most quietly unsettling notes the group ever ended on. Parts of its music actually began life as an entirely different, unfinished song called Rubber Ball Man from 1979, one that Benny and Björn had abandoned after never quite landing on lyrics they were happy with, before eventually repurposing the melody into the tense, synthesizer-driven track that closed out ABBA's original run. 15 songs and 15 sides of ABBA that never made it onto the greatest hits compilations most of us grew up with. From Explorers and Pied Pipers to Cold War dissidents and city-prowling tigers, this is a band that clearly had a lot more going on beneath those glittering jumpsuits and perfect harmonies than the singles alone ever let on. Benny Andersson and Björn Ulvaeus wrote nearly every one of these songs together, often trying out entirely different genres and moods from one track to the next, long before anyone had settled on what an ABBA sound was even supposed to be. That willingness to experiment, even when it didn't always pay off commercially, is part of what makes going back through their full catalog today so rewarding for longtime fans. If you enjoyed digging into these deep cuts as much as we did, give this video a like, subscribe for more music history you didn't know you needed, And let us know in the comments which of these songs was the biggest surprise for you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.